Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged and delighted to welcome a very, very well-known academician, author, strategic thinker from the Netherlands, Professor Bob de Wit. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Nice to be with you. It's an honor.
Thank you. Professor Bob de Wit is an author. He's written a book titled The Society 4.0, Resolving 8 Key Issues to Building a Citizen Society. You can see the book just behind him. He's also written a book on strategy, and we'll talk about that on some other show. He's the owner of a firm titled The Strategy Works. And most importantly, he is the professor of strategic leadership at the Nyenrode Business University in the Netherlands. So, Bob, let's talk about your book, Author Society, of Society 4.0, which is resolving 8 key issues to build a citizen society.
Yes.
Let's start with what are the 3 kinds of societies that humans have established to date?
Yeah, maybe as an introduction, my field is to understand the future. I'm a strategist.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm well known, well used to for 30 years to pick up weak signals and understand what that means for the future. Mm-hmm. And 8 years ago, it occurred to me that increasingly a number of digital technologies, but also other technologies, were getting more prominent in the strategy and the visions of organizations. Mm-hmm. That was in a time when there was a book published by Jeremy Rifkin, The Third Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. And from the beginning, I had the idea that was not correct, but I didn't know what it was. And then in 2017, I delivered an inaugural speech at Nyenrode. Mm-hmm. And while writing that speech, I understood what was wrong with that statement. Mm-hmm. And you can see that on the title. You cannot read it, but I can show it of the title of that thing, mm-hmm. which is called On the Eve of a Societal Revolution. Oh, so in 2017, I already predicted, as a result of a number of developments, technology, but also other developments, that society itself was going to change. Okay. Now, when I was delivering all kinds of speeches on that, people said, I don't see anything, so you must be wrong. And in the beginning of 2020, then there was what it was. Mm-hmm. And I recognized that crisis as a societal crisis, as the beginning of this change. Mm-hmm. And then I decided to write this book, to finish the book, Society 4.0. Okay. So basically what I'm saying is that we have left the industrial society, mm-hmm. and we have begun building a new society, which has a different kind of value creation. Mm-hmm. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, where it comes from? Well, Society 1.0 was a feudal society. Mm-hmm. That was for thousands of years. And the main driver for economic value was land ownership. Mm-hmm. Because if you have a lot of land ownership, you could create agricultural products. Mm-hmm. So if you have land, you were rich and powerful. And if you have no land, you were poor and powerless, basically what it does. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of that society, Society 1.0, there was a different kind of economic value creation, which was trade. And well, we know that both because you're from India, you're traders. I'm from the Netherlands, we're also traders. Mm-hmm. And if I take the example of my country, the Netherlands, we were very strategically located on the land to Europe, but also on the sea. We had a nautic background. Mm-hmm. So we started trading. Now, we had a lot of trade cities, and in the trade cities, the traders were becoming more important than landowners. Mm-hmm. Because if you trade, there's nothing. You have nothing with land. Mm. So step by step, the Netherlands changed, but also other countries changed from land ownership to trade. So we became a republic. So there's a different kind of society, from a feudal society to a republic, mm-hmm. From land ownership to trade. Mm-hmm. That was Society 2.0. Okay. And then came the third society, which began in England with the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. And that was with the beginning of a machine. Spinning jenny was the first machine, by steam powered engine. Mm-hmm. Well, one machine is not changing society, 2 and 3 are not, but at some time, the economic value creation by industrial mass production became larger than by trade. And then again, we got a revolution, industrial revolution. And then we were working a couple of years of building an industrial society, which was again different from the previous ones. Now, my point is that we have left that industrial society and we are building a digital society. And between societies, there's always a lot of unrest. People have different perspectives and ideas what the best society is going to be. That was the same, in the beginning of the industrial society. You had people said, industrial society must be on capitalism. Others said socialism and communism and Leninism and Marxism. All kind of people were thinking about that society. Well, that kind of philosopher is what I'm also. So I'm thinking about how that future society is going to look like, which is Society 4.0.
Fantastic. What a great explanation. So before I proceed any further, Bob, for our viewers and listeners, help us understand what is your definition of a citizen's society?
Yeah, this is a very good question. In my book, I do basically two things. One is I give explanation of the time that we live in. We live between societies. It has nothing to do with health. It has to do with that we live between societies.
Right.
And as always, between societies, there has been different perspectives on that future society. And in every episode, it was a sort of struggle between a top-down society and a bottom-up society. So there were people who said, we have to lead the country by the experts, by the rich and the powerful, and then the population has to follow, right? Which is a sort of elite society, a top-down. And bottom-up is more that you make a society which is good for everyone in the country, for all the citizens.
Okay.
And the struggle that we're in right now is that there are large companies. Some of the companies are larger than most countries, not larger than India, but in the Netherlands, the large tech companies and the finance and the pharma organizations are larger than Germany and Holland and England, So there's a power shift. And what also happened is that most of the public issues are also being resolved at the global level by NGOs, non-governmental organizations, United Nations, and all kinds of charities and all that. Now, the thing is that these companies, I call them corporate states because they're making the rules now, corporate states, the NGOs, United Nations, they are no democracies. So what they're saying is that what we need for the future society is that we put the decisions, the big decisions in the hands of an elite, which is the NGOs and the large organizations and the charities. That is, their vision is that you make, again, a top-down society, a feudal society, but this time at the global level. That is one of those societies. I call that a elite reset society, with a reference to the World Economic Forum, of course.
Sure.
And what I did in my book is also to develop an alternative future vision on Society 4.0. So I started with thinking, how can we develop a new society which is good for everyone, for all the citizens? I call it a citizen society.
Okay.
Now, and in a citizen society, and that has to do with the changing, the development of technology. On the one hand, you have to do something at the global level, but also the technologies make it possible to organize your society at the regional level. And that's why I call it a local citizens, So you live local, but you also live global.
Correct.
A good example is my daughter, by the way. She lives in Spain at the moment. She lives in a very local community, very close to nature. At the same time, she has a coaching practice on Instagram and Facebook.
Wow.
So she works on the global level digitally, but at the same time in the regional level. So my vision is that you build up a new society on the basis of regions, and then you make some kind of connections with the regions and the decisions at the global level. And that's basically what I did.
Fascinating. So, Bob, you also talk about 8 key issues to build a citizen society. What are these 8 issues?
Yeah, what I try to do is to distinguish what are the differences between a elite reset society and a global citizen society. So I went to all the different topics, how you design a new citizen. Now, one of them, well, there are a number of things. One is income distribution. Income distribution means that do you want to have a society in which most of the economic value goes to an elite, or do you want to have a society which is sort of equal for all the citizens, that you can live from it? So income distribution is a big issue. In the last, as from the 70s, the economic value of the lowest 50% in a country has halved. Yeah, so from the gross national product, the lowest half of the population has less half of the income as in the 1970s. So there's an increase of income distribution to an elite. That's a difference. So do you want again to have the income to the elite, or do you want to have the income to the citizens? And interestingly is that it is possible to develop, especially on the blockchain technology. Well, it has a lot to do with technology like blockchain and artificial intelligence and industry platforms. You know, I'm middle of all these technologies. Yeah. It is possible to make a blockchain and then put regional currencies on that. So you can make a sort of societal money, which you can share in a region. And from there, and you can develop everything, you can produce everything. For example, with 3D printing, you can print most of the things that you need. You can make city farms to make your own food. So a lot of the things that you need, which is food, water, electricity, you know, and education, healthcare. With the new technology, you can do that on a regional level. So you can make regional economies, regional societies. And which serve most of the needs that we have as human beings. Now, if you do that, then you make a local economy in which you share all the economic value that you create in a region, and that is much more equal.
Okay, and you know, when I was reading about you and Society 4.0, you also say that Society 4.0 will be an era of advanced digitization. What, according to you, are the top 3 digital trends that you are seeing that will impact the world?
Well, definitely the most important one is the development of artificial intelligence. And that's already, maybe you remember that in 1997, there was the first product of artificial intelligence. That was a chess computer from IBM, Deep Blue. Remember that Kasparov, by far the best chess player in the world, was challenged by IBM with Deep Blue to play chess. And he said, you know, I'm sure that I will win, you know, come on with your computer, because I'm much better than that. Now, he won one game, and then he only lost, you know, and he was devastated. And that was the first moment when humans were defeated by artificial intelligence. Now, that was what we called rule-based artificial intelligence. And from then on, the development of artificial intelligence went on in the Santa Fe Institute for Complex Systems, for example. And the expectation that within 5 years, artificial intelligence will surpass human beings. And that is not just memory or analytic abilities. That's what we call human level of intelligence. Everything that we humans can do, what our intelligence is, can also be taken over by computers. That's called a Turing test. Maybe you know that. The Turing test is you can test whether there's a machine or a human being. And within 5 years, we cannot distinguish anymore between humans and machines. Now, what this means is that why are there 7.5 billion people on this planet? That's not because we're stronger or because we run faster. That's because we're smarter. So within 5 years, the machines will be smarter than human beings. That has enormous consequences. And 5 years ago, also Elon Musk, well known, he said, the most dangerous technology is artificial intelligence. They will surpass human beings. They will have an IQ of 200 or 300. So my conclusion, that's interesting from Elon Musk, is that, and therefore I'm going to upgrade myself. So he developed a company called Neuralink. Maybe you heard of that?
Yeah.
And with Neuralink, he makes a connection between the human brains and artificial intelligence. So you make small wires under your skull, and then you combine the human brain with artificial intelligence. Now, a couple of months ago, there was the first result or the first success of Neuralink. It was published in the newspaper. A big success for Neuralink because they upgraded pigs. Yeah, so did this the experiment on the pigs. It was a success. Well, it was not said what the success was. So then my imagination goes loose. That I think they're dancing on their feet or something. I don't know what intelligent pigs do, but it was a success. And a couple of weeks ago, it was also applied on monkeys. You can see that on YouTube. There were a number of those things, which means that monkeys were sitting behind the screen playing computer games, from children. So they have upgraded monkeys. So within 5 years, there will be people that upgrade themselves with artificial intelligence.
Wow.
There will be then humans that have an intelligence of 200, IQ of 200, 300. And then you have a difference between, those, we call them cyborgs, advanced humans, human technology combinations. Those cyborgs, in 5 years, will have an IQ of 200, Elon Musk or others, which compares to humans the same as from humans to ants. I mean, that's a big difference.
Yeah. And
here again, you have that's a big development. But you can also take robots, and with artificial intelligence, you get artificial intelligent robots with an IQ of 200. These are big things, and we are not thinking about it, but these are ethical questions that we have to discuss. On what are we going to do with it? Because we can use this artificial intelligence to repair the brains of people with brain damage on the one hand, and then you take it for the good. But you can also use it for the bad, and then you get a sort of elite people with a different kind of IQ status. I mean,
very interesting. So, if you were to look at,
there's another technology, if you don't mind.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, because you were asking for three, so this was one. The other is biotech, which is called the CRISPR-Cas9 technology. Now, the CRISPR-Cas9 technology has the ability to cut and paste in human DNA. Last year, the inventors, an American and a Frenchman, got the Nobel Prize for this. So it is a very important technology. And then it was the inventor that you can cut and paste with human DNA. Now then they said, wow, this is fundamental. We have to think about it. So there was a discussion to think about it. But meanwhile, one of those research people, Mr. Hay, Professor Hay, was called from China. He was a Chinese professor. He was called from China. There was a Chinese billionaire. And he said, I have heard about the CRISPR-Cas9 technology. Yes. Well, I have HIV. Can you cut it out of my DNA? He said, I think so. So he went to China. He got a big laboratory, 400 million. And then he took the DNA of this billionaire Chinese. He cut out the HIV. Then he combined that with the DNA of his wife. Then used the IVF technology to bring it into the woman. And 9 months later, it was the birth of Lulu and Nana. Okay. These were the first designer babies in the world.
Wow.
And then the world said, I don't want that. We are not going to design babies behind the screen. And then the Chinese, okay, then we will stop. I'm not sure if they stopped, actually. Okay. So it is well possible that somewhere in China or other places in the world, we don't know, there will be factories making babies, on the basis of picking the human DNAs, the human genome, and see what will be the right things to do. Here again, this is a very fundamental technology. And again, it's about ethical questions, because on the one hand, we can use this technology to cut out all kind of diseases, that I have a family disease in my family, which is young Alzheimer. And if my daughter said, I want to cut out the young Alzheimer out of the DNA before I make babies, I can understand that, So you can improve the world by using this technology in a good way. But you can also use the technology to make sort of superhumans, you cut and paste human DNA somewhere in the factory and make a special kind of Sapiens 2.0 or Sapiens 3.0. Now, this is also a technology which is very fundamental for the future of humanity. And one of the other issues that I discussed in my book, what is the governance of this kind of questions? How do we do this? Because these are fundamental ethical issues on technologies and the results of that on humanity. And who is going to decide what to do? Correct. And then I come back to the two, to two societies. Well, I said, do we leave it to an elite? What we do with it? Is that the NGOs and the undemocratic organizations and the corporate states, corporations making that decision? Well, then I know what the outcome is. Or are we going to do it in a more democratic way? And do we make a sort of government from citizens and make the decision which is good for society and citizens in general? Wow. These are the kind of questions that are very fundamental, and it will be within 5 years.
Wow. So, Bob, let's talk a little bit about the ethical issues. You referred to it a few minutes ago when you were talking. Yeah. Our world already has a very big gap between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah, increasingly.
My own impression has been that digitization, democracy will be able to bring the haves and the have-nots closer. Yeah. But from what I'm hearing from you, the gap is probably going to get wider because those who have technology will get exceptionally wealthy and those who don't will be left stranded.
Well, it is a trend already started in the 70s. So that difference, the have and the have-nots, has been changed since the 70s, and that will continue. If we don't interfere, it will continue for more times. The hope that I bring in my book is that you can also design a different society, and then using the technologies to bring. So that societies itself create economic value. If you take the basis of the future society as a region, and you use all the technologies that humans need for having a good living, then you don't need the global players anymore. With 3D printing, you can print most of things. With on the blockchain technology, you can make your own cryptocurrency. There's also technology like robots. You can develop your own food with robots. With biotech, you can produce the most things that you need. Also, hospitals can be. You don't need large hospitals. With the technology, you can also make smaller hospitals on the regional scale. The same for education. So my hope is that if you develop a regional society with a regional economy, you can make a more equal world. You can make a better world with the same technologies. Again, it's a choice. What we do with the technologies, is it to serve the elite or is it to serve the citizens? And the technologies are neutral. It's what we do with it. And the hope that I give is that with all the technologies, we can make a better world at a regional level. And then we have to work together and stand together and start working on making a better world. And it is possible.
Amazing. So I have time for one more question for you. And I was debating what to ask you. But I think I would like to stay with the digital world that you have been talking about, and such a fascinating picture you have painted. A digital world, Professor, assumes there are no boundaries because they can cut across all boundaries.
Yeah.
What will happen with the world now putting up boundaries, every country becoming very insular, inward looking, everyone saying make in their own country? What will be the impact on the people, the countries, and the owners of the technology?
Can you explain exactly the question again?
No, I'm saying that, a digital world means there should be no boundaries in the world.
Yeah.
Because digital communication happens all the time.
Yeah.
But our politicians are putting up physical boundaries.
Yeah.
How will the digital world clash with these artificial walls that are coming up all over again?
Yeah. It has to do with how the governance of nation states. It has been a scale increase in the economy. It was very local, and there were regional, and there were countries, and now it's worldwide. So there was an upscaling to the global level. and in the industrial society, because of mass production, country borders became more important, and most important political decisions were taking place at the national level. Now, the technologies make it possible to go to the regional level, which would make it smaller at the lower level. But basically it's borderless, so it also works at the global level. So there will be a vacuum between the regional level and the global level. So most of the nation states development, the nation state decision making is becoming more irrelevant. It's getting less important. So at the national level, there will be a problem, because what do you choose? Do you choose to serve the elites, or do you choose to serve the society? That will be a clash.
Okay.
Now, if you look at the global companies, finance, pharma, and big tech. Well, there are no boundaries for them. And let's not forget that most of those tech companies are monopolists.
Correct.
So they act as monopolists. There's no freedom of speech. There's censorship is enormously. They're using all their money and all their power to get people under control. You have to accept their terms and conditions. So they try as a sort of a corporate monopolist to do everything which is in their interest. So they want to design a society which serves their interest, and there's no way to cutting large companies. In the beginning of the industrial society was also a company doing that, and then that was in the United States. The most important resource was oil. And then there was a company called Standard Oil, and they acquired everything on oil. So 90% of the American economy was dependent on one company, Standard Oil. Then there was a court case, and then Standard Oil was split up in 7 oil companies, the 7 sisters. And that was the beginning of the antitrust law. So that was that the market only works if there are more than one or at least 3 competitors. So that happened the same in the beginning of the industrial society. It has to be corrected by cutting up Standard Oil. At this moment, it is useless to cut up the digital technology companies, because how do you cut that? By nation, or how do you do that? So here again, I think they will act as monopolists. And because there are no feedback system, they will fall down at some kind of moment. There will be feedback from people, we don't want that anymore. And what I'm doing at the moment is to develop all kind of decentral, smaller, new technologies that do exactly the same as these large companies are doing. As an example, in a region, we are developing decentral internet and decentral social platforms. So in a region, we put 1,000 small boxes. These are computer servers. We combine them with radiographic interfaces. On top of that, we do software. And on that software, we can run all kinds of social platforms. Then we are independent of the large tech companies, independent of the Facebook and the Instagrams and the LinkedIns and all those. So it is possible, again, with the same technologies, to bring it closer to the people. Then it is yours again, then you as a citizen make the decisions how you want to live in your society. And then the large companies will break down anyway. There's no feedback on that. So they will overvalue themselves, they will be arrogant, and they will fall down. So that's what I think.
Amazing. Bob, on that note, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for talking to me about your book, book Society 4.0. Resolving 8 key issues to build a citizen society. And I'm sure it's available on Amazon. And I'm sure I'll request all our viewers and listeners to check out the book and buy it if you'd like to. Thank you for talking to me so much about the digital world and the challenges and the opportunities that presents for all of us. We will come back again to you to talk about your other book on strategy and another area of specialization. But thank you so much.
It was a great honor for me and a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.